There's a church in England where the doors literally open to hell. At least, that's what locals believe, and after what happened there in 1963, most refuse to go near it after dark. The UK has dozens of villages like this, places where something went so wrong that the land itself feels cursed, where residents warn outsiders to stay away, not out of rudeness, but genuine concern for your safety. We're exploring 6 of the creepiest small towns in the United Kingdom. And these aren't your typical ghost tour destinations. These are places with documented histories so dark that even skeptics get uncomfortable. Let's start with the village that holds an actual Guinness World Record for paranormal activity. Pluckley in Kent has been officially recognised as the most haunted village in Britain since 1989. 12 documented ghosts. That's the official count, though locals insist there are more. The Red Lady wanders the churchyard wearing a full crimson gown, searching for something she lost centuries ago. The Watercress Woman appears near the stream, where she burned to death in 1911. Her name was Sarah Sharp, and witnesses still report smelling burning cloth when she manifests. Then there's the Screaming Man, Richard Bridgeland, who died in a quarry accident in 1899. His shrieks echo from the old clay pit on quiet nights. These aren't folklore. These are real people whose deaths were documented in parish records, and their presence apparently never left. The hanging schoolmaster gets the most attention from ghost hunters. Henry Edgar Martin was actually a papermaker, not a teacher, but he took his own life in August 1919, and his spirit has terrorised visitors ever since. The village also features phantom horses, vengeful highwaymen, and something locals call the Devil's Bush. But perhaps most unsettling is Daring Woods, unofficially known as the Screaming Woods. People who enter report piercing shrieks with no identifiable source. Dogs refuse to go near certain sections. Trees grow in twisted patterns that seem deliberately wrong. Frederick Sanders first called Pluckley the most haunted village in England back in 1950 in an article for the Kentish Express. He listed 10 ghosts then. The count has only grown. What makes this different from typical ghost stories is the sheer volume of witnesses over 70 years. Amateur ghost hunters descend on Pluckley constantly, and the Black Horse pub has become headquarters for paranormal investigators. The pub itself dates back over 300 years, and staff report glasses moving on their own, unseen hands throwing cutlery and dogs that suddenly stop, stare at empty corners and bark at nothing. There's one room upstairs that animals absolutely refuse to enter. Guests have checked out in the middle of the night after experiencing things they won't describe in detail. But here's what really bothers people about Pluckley. It's not abandoned. It's not ancient ruins. It's a functioning village where normal people live normal lives surrounded by documented supernatural activity. Parents raise children here, people commute to work, and everyone just accepts that the Red Lady might drift past your window on a foggy evening. Now, let's discuss a village that doesn't have ghosts. It has something worse: complete abandonment and a broken promise that still haunts the landscape. Tyneham in Dorset was requisitioned by the War Office just before Christmas, 1943. 225 people were given 28 days to pack their lives and leave. The government needed the land and surrounding heathland for military training. Temporary measure, they said. Help win the war, they said. You can return when it's over, they promised. The last resident left on December 17, 1943, pinning a note to the church door that read, "Please treat the church and houses with care. We have given up our homes, where many of us lived for generations, to help win the war to keep men free. We shall return one day and thank you for treating the village kindly." They never returned. In 1948, the army placed a compulsory purchase order on the land. The temporary arrangement became permanent. The residents who sacrificed everything were simply told no. Today, Tyneham sits frozen in 1943. Walking through it feels like stepping into a photograph your grandparents might have taken. The telephone box still stands. The cottages are empty shells, many damaged by decades of military shelling. In 1967, they demolished most of the manor house, parts of which dated to the 14th century. Pieces were salvaged and moved to other estates. The rest was simply destroyed. The village is still part of the Army Ranges, though they now allow public access most weekends and holidays. You can walk along the row, wander through cottage ruins, visit exhibitions in the old school and church. Peter Wellman, the last surviving resident of Tyneham, died in May 2025 at age 100 in Swanage. He spent his entire life displaced from the home his family had occupied for generations. The promise was never kept. What makes Tyneham uniquely haunting isn't paranormal activity. It's the weight of betrayal hanging over everything. These people gave up their homes willingly to support the war effort, trusting they would return. That trust was broken, and somehow the land remembers. The exhibits in the school show photographs of village life before the evacuation. Children playing, families gathered, normal existence, then nothing. Just empty buildings and broken promises. But if you think government betrayal is the darkest thing on this list, wait until you hear what happened when an entire village sacrificed itself to save thousands of lives. Eyam in Derbyshire sits between Buxton and Chesterfield. Population today is around 800. In 1665, it had roughly the same number. By November 1666, 3/4 of them were dead. The plague arrived in late August 1665 inside a parcel of cloth sent from London to the village tailor Alexander Hadfield. When his assistant George Vickers spread the fabric by the fire to air it out, he discovered it was infested with rat fleas. Vickers died days later. His burial was recorded in parish registers on September 7th, 1665. Then more people started dying. The village rector, William Mompesson, and his predecessor, Thomas Stanley, realised what was happening. The plague had reached Eyam, and if it spread to nearby Sheffield or the surrounding towns, thousands would die. So they made a decision that still echoes through history. They convinced the villagers to quarantine themselves. Nobody leaves, nobody enters. We contain this here, or we condemn the region to catastrophe. The villagers agreed. Think about that choice for a moment. These people voted to trap themselves inside a death sentence to save strangers in cities they would never visit. The quarantine lasted 14 months. Supplies were left at the village boundary. Money was placed in vinegar-filled holes in rocks to disinfect it before merchants collected payment. Families watched each other die through windows, unable to help. In August 1666, Elizabeth Hancock lost her husband and 6 children within 8 days. Alone, she dragged each body beyond the edge of her farm to bury them, while people from neighbouring Stony Middleton watched helplessly from a nearby hill. By November 1666, more than 70 families had been completely wiped out. Of the original 344 villagers, only 90 survived. The quarantine worked. Sheffield was spared. The surrounding region continued, but the cost was unimaginable. Today, Eyam markets itself as the plague village. Tourism sustains the local economy. You can visit the church, see the graves, walk the boundaries where supplies were left. Plague cottages still stand with plaques explaining who died inside. What disturbs people about Eyam is not supernatural activity. It's the weight of sacrifice embedded in every stone. These people chose death for the greater good, and we turned their tragedy into a heritage attraction. Is that honouring them or exploiting them? The question hangs over the village, like morning fog, moving to something that feels almost blasphemous after discussing genuine sacrifice. Clophill in Bedfordshire ranks second for creepiest villages in various surveys, but the reasons have nothing to do with historical tragedy and everything to do with desecration. The old church of St Mary, sits at the edge of this small village between Bedford and Luton. It's estimated to be around 650 years old. When a new church was built in the village centre in 1848, the old building was converted to a mortuary chapel. By the 1950s, it had fallen into ruin. Here's where things turn dark. Local legend claims the church was built facing the wrong way in the 14th century. As a result, its doors open to hell. Whether you believe that or not becomes irrelevant when you learn what happened next. During the Big Freeze of 1962 to 63, the church was cut off from the village by snow. On the night of March 10th, 1963, believed to be a full moon, a group made their way to the ruin. What they did there was closer to necromancy than anything else. They opened the tomb of Jenny Humberston, who died in 1770, aged 22. Her skull and bones were taken into the nave of the church. Folklorist Eric Maple described it in a coffee table book on witchcraft as desolate Clophill with a wilderness of D's. Crated and looted tombs, symbols of the revival of black magic in the 20th century. The vicar Leslie Barker reported in 1969 that since the first incident in 1963, there had been numerous instances of graves broken into and some sort of rite performed. It hasn't stopped. With such history, Clophill Church is now known as one of the most haunted places in Bedfordshire. A hooded monk has been spotted on the site. Another ghost, called Sophie, reportedly haunts the church. A coffin belonging to Sophia Mendham was discovered in the nave. She died in 1893. But here's what makes Clophill different from everywhere else we've discussed. The supernatural claims might be fabricated or exaggerated. The desecration is documented fact. Real graves were violated. Real bones were stolen. Real rituals were performed. Whether ghosts exist is debatable. The evil done here is not. Now let's discuss a place where the line between fact and fiction became so blurred that nobody knows what actually happened anymore. Borley in Essex was home to Borley Rectory, described by psychic researcher Harry Price as the most haunted house in England. Built in 1862 to house the parish rector and his family, the Gothic-style building was allegedly haunted from the beginning. Reports multiplied in 1929 after the Daily Mirror published an account of Price's visit. He wrote 2 books supporting paranormal claims. Then, the Society for Psychical Research investigated and rejected most sightings as either imagined or fabricated. They cast serious doubt on Price's credibility. His claims are now generally discredited by ghost historians. Reverend Lionel Foyster and his wife Marianne moved in during October 1930. They reported aggressive phenomena, smashed glasses, broken windows, otherworldly messages scrawled on walls. Marianne claimed an unseen force threw her from bed. After 5 years of escalating terror, they abandoned the house in 1935. Later, Marianne admitted she saw no apparitions. The ghostly noises were wind, friends she invited, and practical jokes she played on her husband. Many legends about Borley Rectory were invented. Children of Reverend Harry Bull, who lived there before Foyster, saw nothing and were surprised to learn they'd occupied England's most haunted house. The rectory burned in 1939 and was demolished in 1944. But here's what's genuinely unsettling about Borley. The village itself has an atmosphere that stops just short of violence. Even though the rectory events happened long ago, the village resents visitors seeking spooks. You don't feel comfortable there. It's won awards for most unfriendly village. The hostility is palpable and unexplained, which brings us to the final location, and possibly the darkest story in English history. Pendle in Lancashire, where in 1612, 10 people were hanged for witchcraft in what became the most famous witch trials in English history. 12 people were accused of murdering 10 others through witchcraft. 11 went to trial, 9 women and 2 men. 10 were found guilty and executed by hanging. The trials were unusual for England at the time because of the sheer number hanged together, 9 at Lancaster and 1 at York. The accused lived around Pendle Hill, a landscape that still dominates the region, with an oppressive presence. At the end of the 16th century, Lancashire was considered wild and lawless by authorities, an area fabled for theft, violence and sexual laxity, where the church was honoured without much understanding of its doctrines. When Henry VIII dissolved the nearby Cistercian abbey at Borley in 1537, locals resisted strongly. The abbot was executed, but the people of Pendle remained faithful to Catholic beliefs, quickly reverting when Queen Mary took the throne in 1553. When Protestant Elizabeth succeeded her in 1558, Catholic priests went into hiding again. In remote areas like Pendle, they continued celebrating Mass in secret. The trial proceedings were published by court clerk Thomas Potts in The Wonderful Discovery of Witches in the County of Lancaster. The detail in that document is what makes these trials so well recorded compared to others. But documentation doesn't answer the real question. Were these people actually practicing witchcraft? Or were they victims of hysteria, religious persecution and local feuds? Today, Pendle has fully embraced its dark history. Local shops sell witch-themed gifts. Burnley's Morehouse's brewery produces Pendle Witches Brew. There's a Pendle Witch Trail running from Pendle Heritage Centre to Lancaster Castle, where the accused were held before trial. Pendle Hill hosts a hilltop gathering every Halloween. The witches have become tourism and heritage industry. But something else happens around Pendle that tourism brochures don't emphasise. Visitors report feeling intense anger when visiting the grounds. Local people fear discussing the trial events even now, over 400 years later. The television show Most Haunted featured Pendle Hill multiple times. Crew members reported being hurt during filming. Some claimed unseen hands strangled them. Medium Derek Acora reported contacting Elizabeth Device, one of the accused witches. Whether you believe in supernatural phenomena or not, Pendle carries a weight that's hard to dismiss. 10 people were hanged, based on testimony that wouldn't hold up in any modern court. Families were destroyed. A community was torn apart. And the hill that witnessed it all still looms over Lancashire, hosting Halloween gatherings, where people celebrate the very tragedy that killed innocent people. So what connects all 6 of these places? Pluckley, with its 12 documented ghosts. Tyneham, with its broken government promise. Eyam, with its sacrificial quarantine. Clophill, with its desecrated graves. Borley, with its fabricated hauntings and genuine hostility. Pendle, with its witch trial legacy. They all share one thing. The past refuses to stay buried. Some of these stories involve genuine supernatural claims. Others involve documented historical tragedies. A few mix both so thoroughly that separating fact from fiction becomes impossible. But in every case, something happened that fundamentally changed these places. The land absorbed the trauma. The buildings hold the memory. The locals carry the knowledge that their home is marked by darkness. You can visit most of these locations. Pluckley welcomes ghost hunters, though locals might give you strange looks. Tyneham opens to the public on weekends. Eyam has fully embraced plague tourism. Clophill Church sits abandoned but accessible. Borley has nothing left to see but an unwelcoming village. Pendle offers trails and heritage centres, but here's what you won't find in tourism brochures. These places changed people. Residents of Pluckley don't joke about the ghosts. Descendants of Tyneham's displaced families still feel the betrayal. Eyam's survivors watched 3/4 of their neighbours die for strangers. Clophill's graves were violated in rituals nobody fully understands. Borley's hostility suggests something deeper than fabricated ghost stories. Pendle's locals fear discussing events from 1612. The UK has thousands of villages. Most have histories, many have tragedies. But these 6 have something extra. A darkness that visitors feel even if they don't believe in ghosts. A weight in the air that makes you want to leave faster than you planned. A sense that you're not entirely welcome. Not because locals are rude, but because the land itself remembers what happened and doesn't want you disturbing it. Whether that's supernatural or psychological doesn't really matter. The effect is the same. These places are marked, and once you've been to one, you understand why locals warn outsiders away. Not to be mysterious, not to protect tourism revenue, but because some places in this country absorbed so much darkness that it permanently stained the landscape, and walking through them means walking through that stain. The question isn't whether these places are actually haunted. The question is whether you're willing to find out.